Lesson number 2 is called financial literacy. So in the book, Robert T. Kiyosaki talks about the fact that his rich dad didn't have a formal technical knowledge in finance, in accounting, taxation, all the disciplines where most people shy away from when it comes to financial independence, or the disciplines that help create financial independence. His poor dad had a lot more knowledge in it because he went to university, highly educated, read a lot. However, rich dad was far more ahead and far more removed from the rat race than his poor dad, who understood all these points. The issue in financial literacy is that rich dad in the book went out and understood that if he did not understand himself something as a concept, he went to learn it. He went to get professionals that helped him understand things like accounting, things like taxation, things like legal issues, things like investing, real estate, so on and so forth. So the key in lesson number 2 is that the rich are financially literate, and if they are not, they hire professionals that are around them to help them become financially literate. Okay? So the issue with financial literacy is that it's a question of interest. A lot of individuals are not interested in the concepts I just mentioned and the disciplines I just mentioned. However, by creating a team around you that are interested in helping you understand these points, you can move towards financial freedom in a much easier and quicker way. So the key points in lesson number 2 are, it's not how much you make or earn, it's how much you keep. So you can make $100,000 a year after taxes to the government, left with more or less $60,000 a year. If you do not save any of that money because you consume it and your fixed expenses are high, so fixed expenses high, variable expenses high, and you do not save, you can be financially literate, you can understand investments, but if you have no money to invest, you're not anywhere further ahead. Once you understand that what you keep are your soldiers that can then work for you, light bulb goes on, and we can definitely use those soldiers to create income producing assets. The second point is that money does not equal financial literacy. So I've seen many clients come to me with inheritances, some lottery winnings, and want to invest that money. So we know the statistics on lottery winners. I'm sure people in your situation or friends and family, you've seen people with inheritances that have spent them. So this point is very, very important. Just because we run into an amount of money does not mean we know what to do with that money. And if we did not come from money, and if we're not financially literate, most likely we will burn through that money. Okay? So this point here is extremely important. We need to use that money to do point number 3, which is we must acquire assets, not liabilities. I'll give you an example. Most people come into an inheritance. What do they first do? Buy a nice car, upgrade their home, better vacations. Those are all, you might think that the home is an asset. The issue is that if that home does not create income, it is an asset, but it's not an income producing asset. It will not help you get away from the rat race. All it will do is shackle you more in the rat race because of higher property taxes, higher heating bills, renovations, so on and so forth. So the key is that if we come into some money, we must acquire assets, and more specifically, income producing assets, plexes, dividend stocks, investment portfolios, etc. Even start a business that creates income as well, patents, so on and so forth. So income producing assets and not liabilities. Avoid the car, the boat, the motorcycle, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so the key to this lesson is financial literacy is very, very important to understand if we do come into money, what we should do with that money. And it's not necessarily how much I earn, it is what I keep, which are my soldiers that I can then action. Here's a visual of assets, liabilities, income, and expenses. So it looks a little bit complicated, but I'll run through the error of most people's ways, which visually keeps them in the rat race, okay? And then I'll explain the little note that I put on the left. So in essence, various assets are real estate, investment portfolios, businesses, intellectual property. Those are assets, okay? Your home is an asset as well. Liabilities, mortgage, credit cards, lines of credit. So those are liabilities, okay, which carry a monthly expense and a cost. Income is in the form of salaries, dividends, rent from real estate properties, and expenses, which are fixed variables. So fixed expenses like your mortgage payment, your rent, taxes. Variable expenses are vacations. You could say certain car expenses if it's a fun car, etc. So those are fixed and variable expenses. Restaurants fall under variable. So you get the idea. So how do people visually end up being stuck in the rat race? So essentially what they do is they collect a salary because we've exchanged our time for money, as I mentioned in lesson number 1. So we have no choice to go to work every day and earn that paycheck for the time given. So we earn that income, which affords us no free time. And essentially what we'll do is most of us will spend it here. So we'll go income, and then I'll start with my fixed expenses, such as my income taxes, things I have no choice to pay, and variable expenses, and then I have zero money left over. So that's the simplest and worst way of operating, because you're absolutely stuck in the rat race. You will never get to financial freedom because you're always living for that next paycheck. The second situation that people will employ or follow is they'll earn that same salary, okay? They'll spend on fixed expenses like taxes, rent, and then they will buy assets thinking that they're assets, but actually they are liabilities, okay? So think of an example. They'll buy a vacation home thinking that it's an asset, but they're really buying a liability, a car that they don't need, a motorcycle, a boat, so on and so forth, okay? So it's better than the first option, but it's still not the best option that's going to get you out of the rat race and headed towards financial freedom. What the rich do is they take their salary and any other type of income that they have, so dividends from real estate investment portfolios, rents from real estate investments, they'll take these sources of income, okay? So I'll highlight it in a different color here so you see. They'll take these sources of income and they will buy income producing assets, as I mentioned earlier. So they'll buy assets which produce more income to then feed back into here, and with the income from these assets, they will spend on expenses. So what they're doing is that they're taking their money, they're paying their fixed expenses, their income taxes, things they have to pay. They then use those soldiers to buy income producing assets. They start a business. They invest in real estate that creates rental income. They invest in portfolios that create distributions in the form of interest or dividends. And they take that leftover money and they use those soldiers, as I mentioned earlier, to spend on the variable expenses such as a vacation, and so on and so forth. Sky's the limit in terms of variable expenses. So in a nutshell, what that means, and if you look at the notes on the left here, is that the rich buy assets, and more specifically income producing assets. The poor buy or have expenses, as I mentioned earlier, there to there. And the key is here, which is where most people fall, is the middle class, which is absolutely stuck in the rat race. They buy liabilities thinking that they are assets. So the biggest issue is that in order for us to spend on variable spending, we must move towards doing that by the income from our income producing assets, not the income from our salary, because if we keep doing that, we never can step back and invest our time in other areas, such as starting a business, such as buying real estate. If we're constantly exchanging our time for money, we are in the rat race and we will never get out of it.